Hi there, my name's Ben and I like to read. I also haven't done one of these in quite some time. So for the 49th book that we'll be reviewing on this channel, it's one that I've teased in my earlier videos, and it's none other than Crime and Punishment, or if it focuses, by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So a little bit of background about the author first. Fyodor Dostoevsky is a Russian writer who was active in the 19th century. He's written works such as The Brothers Karamazov, The Idiot, Notes on the Underground, and of course, Crime and Punishment, which is considered to be his magnum opus, which is actually one of his first books that he wrote. But he also worked as a journalist, an essayist, a little bit of a poet as well. He's considered to be one of the great Russian writers, with good reason, and Crime and Punishment is considered to be one of the preeminent works of human literature ever, for good reason, but also there are some issues with it as well. This book has been lionized by particular academics, especially certain ones as well. I know it's a favorite of the psychologist Jordan B. Peterson, who some of you may be familiar with. Of course, what do you mean by crime and what do you mean by punishment? It's a terrible joke, but regardless, it's a solid book, and I'll explain why, but although I do have some issues with it. So a quick little plot synopsis. It follows this guy called Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, who is this guy who's chilling in St. Petersburg, kind of a university student. He goes about life in this sort of terrible ennui, and he plots to murder a couple of people, mainly this old lady who keeps valuables in her flat and this pawnbroker. He ends up murdering both of them. And, rather than getting this release that he thought he was going to get, instead he faces this existential dread, and the book sort of explores him trying to rationalize, his feelings and his guilt. And it ends up being kind of a discussion about rationalism, utilitarianism, and the Russian brand of nihilism. And Dostoevsky kind of uses this, the plot being, of course, Raskolnikov's trying to redeem himself. And of course, I will spoil it for you. He does end up going to prison for about 8 years in the epilogue, and he kind of gets roasted by some of his fellow inmates for, especially because the way that he killed the old lady, he killed her with an axe, except not the blade of it. He killed her with the wooden handle of it. So people rightfully roast him for it, and they say, well, why didn't you just use a knife like a normal person? But at the same time, it's although there's a little bit of comedy, I guess, in that one, it's a little bit dark. But essentially the crux of the book is, the suffering of man is both cruel and necessary, as evidenced by Raskolnikov's redemption. I'm not sure who quite said that, but I think to be an accurate assessment of the plot itself. Now, I've reviewed Russian literature on this channel in the past. It's very, very dense. Thankfully, I have the enriched classic version. This one comes with explanatory notes, with discussion questions, and I really must say, if you find Russian translations as difficult to read as I do, this one is the edition that you want to pick up, because it provides all the necessary notes in here, because of course, especially with Russian, people have three names. Of course, they have their given name, their patronymic, and their family name. And the book in English cycles between the use of these three names for different for the same character, and it can be a little bit difficult to follow. Not to mention as well, as I've mentioned previously, when translating Slavic languages into English, you lose a lot of linguistic flourish, and the flourishes in English and in Slavic languages like Russian or Serbo-Croatian or Ukrainian, whatever else, though they don't translate, like the ones from the Slavic languages don't translate well into English, and the ones in English don't translate well into the Slavic languages. So you do lose a little bit of the flow within there, and it does, and again, it seems it is very, very dense. I had a professor once who described, 1 page of Russian literature is essentially the equivalent of 10 pages of the English language. It's extremely dense. And this book, with exploratory notes and everything, clocks in at a little under 680 pages. So there's a lot of material in here. How does it read, though? Well, it reads as well as it can, given all of the stuff that's working against it. And is it considered, does it deserve to be considered one of these supreme achievements in human literature? Jury's still out for me on that one. I think that ultimately it is a really, not quite, almost a scathing, actually, portrayal of or critique on rationalism and utilitarianism and nihilism. However, it's very tinged with religion in there as well. Essentially, what I got from it is that it's very Nietzschean in the sense that God is dead in the sort of sense where there is no objective truth. If we try to just go all into utilitarianism or all into rationalism, we are going to devolve into nihilism. And once that happens, and in order to avoid that, we should just, stick to the dogma of the church. And because that's going to safeguard us, that's going to provide us with an objective standard and, the possibility of redemption for any of our sins and stuff like that. So in that sort of a sense, I don't necessarily agree with it. But I do appreciate the fact that it is brave enough to take on rationalism and utilitarianism almost simultaneously. And I think that it is an important work. I can't stress that enough. I think that it's not going to be for everybody. Did I enjoy it? Yeah, I did, but it's not, I wouldn't necessarily pull Jordan Peterson and, lionize it as, oh my God, this is the greatest book of all time, and which I don't think he thinks that, but I think he would more so prefer Solzhenitsyn, who, ironically enough, was influenced by a lot of what Dostoevsky had to say. It does, of course, bring up some really, really interesting questions, though. I believe there was a book review for it that had stated, the crux of the book is that man is condemned to be free. And that reminds me of the Christopher Hitchens quote, "We have no choice but to have free will." And I think it's very, very true. We really don't have a choice but to be free. It's what we do with that freedom that matters. And the reason why I don't necessarily jive with the book is because I am a little bit, or at least with what the book has to say, is that I don't think we need the dogma of the church in order to spare us from nihilism. We can do that ourselves. We just have to, at the very least, Nietzsche is very lucid in this, where we have to recreate our own values instead of, falling back on old ones and really giving ourselves to dogma, which I don't necessarily think is the right way to go. Now, should I recommend this book? Yes, I think everybody should read it. It's a classic for a reason. Nobody else could have written this book, in my opinion, because it's so undeniably human, yet but it is a very human story at the end of the day, and Dostoevsky is really good at capturing that humanity. At the same time, it's also a very Russian book, and I think only a Russian could have written something like this, because just given the cold environment that they have, and not just from the weather, but also the environment of St. Petersburg, that, you know, in that 19th century, that Dostoevsky is also critiquing. It's almost as though it's a very lucid portrayal of humanity in that part of the world that can be applied universally. And for that reason, I think it is rightly considered to be a magnificent achievement of human literature. I don't think it's the supreme one, mainly because, again, there's better books out there. That said, should I recommend it? Yeah, why not? Everybody should read it. Just at the very least, even if you don't agree with everything that's in there, because I certainly didn't. And even though I found it a crazy read, because it is so dense and it's very long, yeah, everyone should read it, if not to enjoy it, but at least to say that you've read it. And you should read with stuff that you don't necessarily agree with either, because, again, that's only going to improve your point of view. I do like the attacks on rationalism and utilitarianism, because, again, we need to challenge every single philosophical school in order not just to make it stronger, but also to potentially see if they are viable. And I think this offers a very novel attack on both of them. I don't agree with Dostoevsky's solutions, though. But in that case, I'll turn the question to you. Have you read Crime and Punishment? If so, did you enjoy it? Have I completely missed the mark with this book review? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Drop a comment down there. Drop a like on the video as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching.